A few days after King Charles II of Spain died, attendants opened his body. What they wrote down sounded less like an autopsy and more like a nightmare. A heart they compared to a peppercorn, lungs described as corroded, intestines said to be rotting, a head, they claimed, filled with water. For years, the Spanish court had called Charles cursed. But the strangest thing about his body was not what the doctors found inside it. It was that the real cause had begun long before Charles was born. Charles entered the world as the only surviving male heir to a dynasty that controlled Spain and a global empire. The palace did not simply need him to live. It needed him to become a husband, a father, and a king. But while other children ran through palace corridors, Charles struggled to stand. He did not speak until around 4. For years, servants supported him through rooms built to display royal strength. His lower jaw pushed forward so far that chewing became difficult. His tongue was reportedly enlarged. Courtiers often struggled to understand him. One desperately ill child might have been bad luck. Then the same face began appearing in the portraits behind him. The long face, the heavy lower lip, the jaw that seemed to grow stronger from one generation to the next. Court painters believed they were preserving royal dignity. Without knowing it, they were also preserving evidence. Centuries later, researchers compared facial features across dozens of Habsburg portraits with the closeness of the marriages that produced their subjects. The pattern was not perfect, but it was clear. The more closely related the parents, the more pronounced the famous Habsburg jaw tended to be. The paintings had been recording the family's biology all along, but a jaw could not explain the empty cradles. Across the Spanish Habsburg line, roughly half of the children examined in the study died before the age of 10. That was far worse than the survival recorded among ordinary Spanish villagers from the same period, and the losses became more severe as the family tree moved closer to Charles. A curse might explain one sick king. It could not easily explain generations of miscarriages, dead children, weak heirs, and the same physical features returning through the same bloodline. Something was moving through this family. The court blamed a curse instead. The explanation was in the marriages. The people around Charles already believed they knew what was happening. They called him El Hechizado, the bewitched one. Relics were brought to the palace. Priests attempted exorcisms on a reigning king. Physicians blamed childhood disease, poor nutrition, and rickets. Each explanation could account for part of what they saw. None explained the whole family pattern. Then there was the fact the court preferred not to discuss. Charles's parents were uncle and niece. That sounds like the solution. It was only the final layer. Subscribe to Helix Files for more hidden genetic history. The real pattern went far deeper than one marriage. An uncle and niece having a child creates a high degree of shared ancestry. But that single marriage still did not explain how extreme Charles had become. Follow his family backward, and the same people return again and again. Cousins marry cousins. Uncles marry nieces. One branch joins another, only for both branches to lead back to the same ancestor. On paper, each wedding connected two powerful royal houses. Genetically, it often connected the family to itself. A family tree is supposed to spread outward. Charles's kept folding inward until the tree looked less like branches and more like a trap. For centuries, historians could see the pattern, but could not measure its accumulated effect. Then researchers reconstructed more than 3,000 people across 16 generations of the Spanish Habsburg family. They were not sequencing DNA taken from Charles's remains. No laboratory sample from his body was used. Instead, they calculated how much of Charles's genetic inheritance was likely to have come from the same ancestors on both sides of his family. The result is called an inbreeding coefficient. 16 generations of royal marriages collapsed into one number. And Charles's number was almost impossible to believe. For a child of first cousins, the expected coefficient is about 0.0625. For a child of an uncle and niece, about 0.125. Charles II scored 0.254. The expected value for the child of a brother and sister is 0.25. Generations of royal marriages had produced a genetic result roughly equivalent to siblings having a child. Charles was not the result of one disastrous decision. He was where all of those decisions finally met. The number helps explain why harmful inherited risks could return from both sides of the family. It does not prove that every illness Charles suffered had one cause. His body was too complicated for that. But Europe did not need Charles to be medically understood. It needed him to have a child. At 18, he married Marie-Louise of Orléans. She reportedly wept when she learned she was being sent to marry the sickly Spanish king. Yet Charles appears to have loved her deeply. For nearly a decade, they tried to produce the heir on whom the dynasty depended. Every month, the court waited. Every month, nothing happened. The court blamed Marie-Louise. She was subjected to fertility treatments that could not give her a child and may only have made her ill. Then, 9 years into the marriage, she collapsed with violent abdominal pain. Charles rushed to her side. She died at 26, without the heir Spain had demanded from her. Within weeks, the search for a second wife began. The new queen, Maria Anna of Neuburg, came from a family famous for fertility. She had 16 siblings. It looked like the perfect solution. The second marriage produced exactly as many children as the first, 0. By the end of the 1690s, Charles's health was collapsing, and every major power in Europe was calculating what would happen when he died. The king's private inability to produce a child had become a continental emergency. Possible heirs were selected, rejected, and replaced. One chosen successor died before Charles. Courtiers then fought around the king's bed, each faction trying to control the final name in his will. Charles died in 1700 without a child. The Spanish Habsburg line ended with him. Within months, the struggle over his throne pulled Europe into the War of the Spanish Succession. And then the attendants opened his body. The old report described a heart like a peppercorn, damaged lungs, decaying intestines, fluid inside the skull, and a single atrophied testicle. Some details may have been exaggerated in the retelling, but the portrait they created was unmistakable. Charles's body had been failing almost everywhere at once. The court had called that a curse because it could see the damage, but not the mechanism. The portraits preserved the face. The records preserved the dead children. The marriages preserved the trail, and the family tree preserved the number that connected them. The Habsburgs protected their bloodline to keep power inside the family. In the end, the nightmare was already inside it.